Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are in attendance. A few housekeeping rules before we begin. If members of the public in attendance need to use the facilities, they are located in the main foyer on this floor. If there is a fire alarm, please leave the building by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the cathedral concourse. Can I also remind members to put their phones on silent during the meeting? Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer if there are any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Harper, Rush and Sharp, and Councillor Rangsdale and Councillor Lane on attendance and substance.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Councillor Hiller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am the Director of NPS, although I've had no conversations or dialogue whatsoever or correspondence with any of my colleagues regarding either of these applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
I'd just like to declare that both the items that we're going to be discussing are in my ward. So.
Thank you. Does any member of the committee wish to make representations as a ward councillor or any of the listed items? No? Please can I ask Asif Ali to introduce item number 1, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. The application site is land to the south of Bishop's Road, and the proposal is for the construction of a temporary car park and associated works to enable the development of the University of Peterborough. The temporary car park is sought for a period of 5 years. Next slide, please. Just a quick background on phases 1 and 2 of the university. Thank you. Next slide. So this slide just outlines the different car parks. So you've got the Bishop's Road car park, Marina, and the regional pool car park. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So phases 1 and phases 2 are located on the Marina car park, and you've got the regional pool car park highlighted there, which is the potential location for the multi-deck car park. So phase 1 was approved as a standalone planning application. Phase 2 and the multi-deck car park were approved as part of a hybrid planning application. The phase 2 building is currently under construction. Phase 1 has been completed, and the multi-deck car park was the outline element of the hybrid application. So phase 2 was the full element. As part of the phase 2 development, the transport statement was submitted where a requirement of 128 car parking spaces above and beyond the city centre provision were highlighted and recommended and agreed, and a condition securing the construction of the multi-deck car park is being considered within the next item before members. Just on the temporary car park provides that minimum of 128 car parking spaces, which is before members. Next slide, please. So the application site. The application site is, it makes use of the existing road network near the regional pool building, and is located on a part of POS to the rear of Bishop's Road Park. You've got the Frank Perkins Parkway to the east, and you've got a footpath and a cycle path to the south and to the east of the site as well. Next slide, please. So the proposed temporary car park makes use of a in and out system. So the entry would be via the west access, and the exit would be up north near the onto Bishop's Road. The temporary car park involves the loss of some shrubs to make way for the access, and some trees as well. This will be discussed later. Next slide, please. So this is just a red outline of the rough location of the temporary car park as compared to the POS. Next slide, please. So this is the Riverside North Policy Area, LP51, which designates an area which can be used for the University of Peterborough campus. Next slide, please. So this is the landscaping plan. So you've got, as identified, the replacement trees will be planted to the south of the site, complementing some existing trees and landscaping there. The replacement shrubs will be planted directly, immediately south to the site, and you'll have 2 bird nest boxes and some ecology mitigation along the trees there. Next slide, please. As discussed on site, members wanted to see some external lighting, so this is the external lighting plan. You've got the blue circles identify lighting columns. So as you can see, the main car park as well as the footpaths that come out of each car, come out either side of the access are all lit. You've got, we've secured CCTV provision there just to the south of the access. But yeah, next slide, please. So these are a couple of photographs of the site. Could you go back to the proposed site plan, please? Sorry. A couple more. That one, please. Yep. Yep, thank you. So the purple dot to the south of the access is the CCTV column. There's some associated work, so you've got footpaths on either side of the car park, connecting towards the regional pool building as well as to the access up north. The main car park would consist of a knee rail around the main temporary car park provision, but it has been deliberately minimized any kind of landscaping or any built structures around the temporary car park. A condition has been recommended to be included onto the decision notice, which requires the car park to be returned to its original or existing state once the 5-year period has been expired. So that involves removing all the structures, the roadwork, network, and all those associated elements. So officers considered that by minimizing any kind of fixed structures or landscaping would minimize, would allow the conversion to go ahead with ease, as well as maintaining the replacement planting that had been secured. Just in terms of the summary of planning issues, 25 objections were received from the members of the public. Some of the topics raised was the loss of green space and the embankment, the demolition of the existing car park at Northminster, the impact on the road network or the public highway network involving Bishop's Road and the mini roundabout on Bishop's Road and Vineyard Road, whether the site would become a permanent car park, and the length of use and the overall transport and parking plan for the city centre. These issues are discussed within the committee report. Just with regards to the demolition of the existing car park at Northminster, it wasn't a material consideration. Officers obviously were considering what was before them. The local highway authority raised no objection with regards to the impact on the road network at Bishop's Road. With regards to the permanent nature of it, this is a temporary car park. Officers have secured a condition securing the provision for 5 years, and once that period has completed, it needs to revert back to its original use. In terms of the overall transport and parking plan, the 128 parking figure was identified as part of the Phase 2 planning applications, so the Phase 2 and the multi-deck car park planning application, and that permission remains extant. The purpose of this application isn't to discuss the numbers, because they've already been agreed and are put forward as part of that application or permission. All this permission looks at is the provision of that car park and where the facilities go. In terms of the principle of development, so the application site is located within the Riverside North policy area where where the council has allocated land for the University of Peterborough campus. It would be a temporary loss of public open space, but when considering the planning balance of the impact and the public benefit, it was considered that as this proposal allows or enables the development of the University of Peterborough, there is a clear public benefit. There is a condition on the Phase 2 application which required 128 car parking spaces to be provided before Phase 2 can be can commence or can be used. So that is a consideration. In terms of consultee comments, there's been no objection from the local highway authority, the wildlife officer, the tree officer, the pollution control and the drainage team. There are objections from the landscape officer and the council's archaeologist on grounds of loss of open space and the potential for elements of prehistoric field systems on site. As discussed, the principle of development is accepted in terms of that planning balance, and it is considered that the impact on the potential prehistoric systems will be less than substantial, and it's considered that the public benefits of the university development and the enabling via this application are clear. Some of the other considerations were design and character, parking provision and highway safety, trees, wildlife, drainage and archaeology. They are discussed within the committee report, but just with regards a couple of issues that were raised, the council has secured sufficient replacement trees and landscaping, and the council's tree officer has raised no objection to that. With regards to the design approach, officers have kind of clarified why we've gone with, why we've tried to minimize the landscaping and built structures around the temporary car park itself. And finally, the application does seek to provide parking provision as identified and accepted by the council on the previously approved planning permission for the Phase 2 and multi-deck car park permission. But officers have made it clear that this isn't a permanent solution, and as part of the wider master plan application or master outline planning application for the wider university site, officers would expect a overall parking and transport strategy or plan to address parking and transport on a more permanent basis. As such, officers, just a couple of things on the update report. Officers have recommended a slight update to condition C10 regarding drainage, where it's gone from a discharge condition to a compliance condition. Further details were provided during the course of the application, resulted in an additional objection was raised during the call-in period, but that's been covered within the committee report. So officers are recommending approval to members, subject to the conditions securing the temporary provision of the car park, and once the 5-year period is complete, to revert back to its existing use, and a couple of other conditions. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Asif, for your presentation. We have 2 people registered to speak on this item. Please can I ask Charlotte Palmer and Richard Smith to address the committee. You will have 5 minutes in which to address the committee. The Democratic Service Officer will let you know when you have 30 seconds left and when the 5 minutes have lapsed. When you are ready, if you can please switch on your mic and start speaking. Thank you.
Hello there. Yeah, I'm Richard Smith, the planning consultant for this project. I'm here on my own today, so Charlotte Palmer won't be speaking, but I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the planning application. As you've heard from your planning officer, this proposal is to develop a temporary car park to serve the regional pool customers on an area of open space to the south of Bishops Road. This car park is required to replace 128 spaces in the existing regional pool car park, which will be leased to the university to enable the Phase 2 development. The application effectively seeks to provide parking in a different way than originally envisaged. In June 2021, planning permission was granted for a deck car park on the existing regional pool car park to serve the university pool. However, the university has since reconsidered its plans as a location would prejudice the future development of the university campus. The proposed temporary car park is therefore intended for a period of 5 years, whilst the campus master plan is prepared to consider the use of the area, and university campus parking provision is provided in a more strategic way. Whilst we acknowledge that the proposal would result in the temporary loss of open space, we believe the wider material considerations and public benefit outweigh this. The loss of open space will only be for a temporary period of 5 years, until the university campus master plan established more permanent parking solutions. When the car park is no longer required, the former use will be reinstated and can be improved by way of biodiversity enhancements. Furthermore, the temporary car park will offer a public benefit by enabling the university Phase 2 expansion and supporting the development of the master plan. So in terms of design and layout, the car park has been sensitively designed to minimise its impact. It will be surfaced with grasscrete on the parking bays and a porous asphalt on the roads and turning area. We're providing a low boundary treatment consisting of a knee rail, timber post and rail fencing around the boundary, and it's proposed to have a barrier access at the entrance to the southwest to limit its visual impact. The proposal will provide replacement planting for vegetation lost to provide the access in the form of 10 trees, shrubs and wildflower areas to the south of the car park to soften the appearance and to allow their retention following the use ceasing, as agreed with Council's landscape officer. Tree replacements, as well as planting of hawthorn, holly and bird cherry whips and bat and bird boxes will be provided to mitigate for loss of habitats and provide biodiversity enhancements. The landscaping scheme has also been designed to limit the impact on species in the area such as bats and migrating birds, and will provide a safe and secure car park which limits light spill, as agreed with the designing out crime officer and the council's ecologists. With regard to traffic movements, it should be recognised the proposed car park is being provided instead of the additional car parking spaces in the deck car park, and therefore there will not be an increase in number of vehicles to the site above that already agreed and approved for the Phase 2 university development. In terms of flood risk, the car park will have a permeable raised asphalt surface as well as grasscrete parking bays on avoided stone sub-base to reduce runoff and flood risk as agreed with the lead local flood authority. In terms of archaeology, we have done an archaeological evaluation and we agree with the officer in terms that the public benefits of this scheme would outweigh the harm to any sort of prehistoric field systems identified in that archaeological evaluation. Therefore, the proposed temporary car park, we believe, has been sensibly designed to limit its impact on the area, consistent with planning policies in the local plan and MPPF. Whilst the development will result in a temporary loss of open space, it is considered this can be justified with reference to the wider material public benefits of enabling development at the university campus. Furthermore, the loss of open space will only be temporary. The open space can be fully reinstated and improved in terms of biodiversity once the car park is no longer required. We would therefore invite members to support their officer's recommendation of approval.
Thank you for your presentation. Do any members of the committee wish to ask a question? Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Essentially, the 128 spaces that have been identified for this car park are essentially there just to replace something that is already in existence so that you can then do something else with it. Was there no capacity scheme looking at the actual number that would be required? What I'm saying in terms of the capacity of other car parks in the vicinity, the Bishops Road, the various others that are within walking distance. Why did we settle on 128, or was it just supposedly a like-for-like replacement?
terms of this planning application, that figure was based on the phase 2 development where they did the studies in terms of the transport requirements for that part of the development. So we are doing a like-for-like replacement based on those earlier sort of capacity studies in the transport statements.
So essentially, we're temporarily restricting the amount of open space in our city because you have to replace like for like, regardless of what the actual need is within the city, the need for those car parking spaces. That's irrelevant, and that you're basically saying that because we're closing down a car park of 128 spaces, we have to replace it with 128 spaces.
I can only sort of repeat that the need was identified in the previous reports for the phase 2 development, so that did the capacity studies to say how many spaces would be needed when the university was operational, and therefore there wasn't a need to do a further study because we were replacing what had been agreed at committee in 2021.
But you're providing no evidence of a need for these car parking spaces other than the fact that it's something to do with the previous planning application, which is not something that we are supposed to be, we're supposed to be looking at it as a separate item. So whilst you might have a need for 128 spaces, you've not given us any evidence that there is an actual requirement for 128 spaces other than something to do with the previous planning application.
Councillor, wouldn't that be a question for officers?
It can be, yes.
It relates
by
to
all means,
application, doesn't it?
MPS have brought this application. This isn't the first time that MPS has brought an application that has had holes in it, if I'm being honest. And I feel that this is yet another example of where they've come with the bare minimum, expecting us to rubber stamp something, rather than actually giving us the information that we require as a planning committee. We're being asked to look at whether or not this is needed or not, and whether or not it, ultimately it breaks a number of our local plan rules. I would like to see demonstrated why we need 128 spaces. That information is not here. It is not in the application. And as far as I'm concerned, I need to know why that is.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to finally respond to that, and then we'll move on. Okay.
I think obviously we've prepared the planning application. We've had pre-up discussions with the council in terms of what information we needed to provide with the application. We have used the information from the previous planning applications in terms of what need was required in terms of number of spaces. We haven't been asked to provide any further information on that through this process.
Another question that I have for you is, so the car park, this is for 5 years. Is that 5 years from the start of construction or 5 years from today if it was to be approved? So the point I'm trying to make is, would you be looking to start straight away? Or would you be looking to start when, because you've already intimated that there's an issue with the fact that the car park that was agreed is probably not now required or needs to be put somewhere else.
Councillor, sorry to interrupt. I think that's a question for the officers. I mean, you could ask that question for the officers.
But it's about their plans as to whether or not they want to build it or not.
Yeah, please do ask that question to the officers. I think it more relates to the officers. However, I have a question. Now, you're saying that the car park is going to be on a temporary basis for 5 years. Would you be minded to extend that 5 years, or is it strictly 5 years?
Well, the application's in, and obviously there's a condition on it requiring the 5-year consent, and we're, as far as we're concerned, this is what the council are applying for in terms of they need it for 5 years while this master plan's prepared for the university campus and how they're going to treat parking for the longer term. So it gives an ample period of time for them to prepare that and then have a better idea of where and how much parking space that they need on the site as it's developed.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Ranzit?
Yeah, in relation to 5 years, would this be reverted to in its original condition as it is, and who would be responsible for that?
I mean, yes, the condition again is to revert back to open space, and it would be the council as owner's responsibility to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain?
Sorry, I just wanted to check, you mentioned the grasscrete surface, and it's not something I'm aware of. Is it like a grid system that you can then take up quite easily? And is that the reason you're using that? Could you describe or tell me what that is?
I think it was originally designed with grasscrete because it is a concrete paving system which allows grass to grow through it. It's a little bit more sensitive in terms of it's a lot greener than just having pure sort of asphalt across the whole of the site. So again, you know, it would have to go down. It would need to come up as with the asphalt. So I doubt there's any difference in terms of taking it up. But actually, for the period that we have it, it should look more attractive in terms of being a little bit more sensitive to the site.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Hiller?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure you won't take offence at the disparaging comments you've had about your firm. I don't share those comments patently. Could we have the slide that shows the whole of the embankment area? And, no, keep going. Keep going. No. The graphic rather than the photograph. The reason I ask, that's, I think that was it. Yes, that's it. That is the area of green, but that's not the application site, is it? The application site itself is a smaller area within that area. Is that? Yes. Yes. The reason I ask is that Councillor Hogg has said on more than one occasion that it is restricting open space. Now, that's a fair chunk of open space. I think you'll perhaps agree with me. Could I just ask for your comments about the comment about restricting open space with that in mind?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, but in terms of that open space, obviously on there isn't the whole area of the site, the car parking site. We're sort of half of that site on there. So in terms of restricting it, there's still access. There'll still be access to the open space on there, and it'll be half will be retained. The remainder will be car park for that temporary period.
The comment I think I'm probably asking you for, and I'm not wishing to feed you a comment by any stretch, of course, is that when you look at the embankment area, I mean, it's pretty big, isn't it? It appears, whilst this is my own opinion, that the chances and the likelihood of an arena coming on that embankment are becoming less and less and less and less, with the striking off of Peterborough United Property Limited from Companies House, etc., etc. So when we're looking at an area like that, when you're looking at a temporary 5-year allocation of a surface level car park, it to me, to the layperson, to me, it doesn't look as though we're restricting open space by any great margin. That would be my comment.
That's right. I agree with what you're saying in terms of, yes, as you say, it's a large area of open space. It's not going to restrict how people use that open space by putting a temporary car park on part of that site. But as you're aware, you know, there is the embankment master plan which looks at the wider area, and you know, there may be future plans to use it differently, but this is just a scheme which we're putting forward at the moment. But it's temporary because, as you know, the university campuses need to do their master plan. We've got the embankment master plan being prepared as well, so that, you know, in time there will be changes across the site. So a temporary permission would seem a sensible solution at this period, while some decisions are made of how the land is going to be used, and the rest of the remaining open space sort of enhanced.
Okay. With regard to, I'm sorry to pursue this, but with regard to the numbers that Councillor Hogg cited on a couple of occasions, you are acting on behalf of your client and the numbers you were given, presumably, rather than something you cooked up yourself or NPS.
That is correct, yes. We've obviously we've been asked to provide a planning application, and we've had the pre-app discussions with the with the planners, so we were told what information we needed to provide with the application.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you for your presentation. You may now return to your seat in the public gallery. Now, do any members have any questions for officers? Councillor Hogg.
So not unsurprisingly, I'm now sort of turning that question to yourselves as to why we don't see before us some sort of document that justifies the need for 128 car parking spaces, other than the fact that it has something to do with another planning application. Because, you know, obviously this is open space. If the number of spaces could be halved, well then that would be less open space that would be changed because of this application.
Through you, Chair. The figure, the 128 figure, comes from the transport statement that was accepted in 2021 as part of that phase 2 planning application. Because this temporary car park seeks to enable that, using that, the figure isn't under consideration. It's more where that proposal goes. The council can't request a further statement or we can't refuse this application based on the lack of a transport statement. The consideration is where rather than how many, because we've already accepted a transport statement in 2021, which is recent. So I guess that, I mean, if you were right, I could respond on the condition question that you raised.
Sorry, so essentially we're told time and time again that we're not supposed to look at other applications as to, you know, this is in its sole nature. And may I suggest that, you know, we are here today also to overturn a condition that was made on that exact same planning application. So the point I'm trying to make here is that rather than just dumping 128 car parking spaces into an open space provision, what we could do is we could look at what the actual requirement is, make an application on that basis, and then seek a condition change to the original planning application, saying that we've now looked at it and we don't need 128 spaces, and this is the evidence that we have before you that says that we used for this application, rather than the other way round, where we're basically getting the cart to load the donkey. I mean, we had a report in 2022 from Royal Haskoning about car parking strategy, which shows that car parks in the area are underutilised, and so therefore there is actually space available. And actually the car park in question that we're seeking to replace of 128 spaces has for some time been restricted the number of spaces in that car park due to the construction of the university. So again, that car park itself isn't currently at 128 spaces. It's been severely curtailed. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this application, it seeks to take away some of our open space provision, and you know, we are here as the Planning and Environmental Protection Committee. So you know, we need to be looking at, do we need 128 spaces for this car park? And I see no evidence that says that there is actually 128 spaces needed, other than that it pertains to some previous
Councillor, can I intervene? Can you ask the question, please?
So the question is, that, you know, you tell me that we're not allowed to look at the numbers, and I'm saying I want to push back on that and say that we very much should be looking at the numbers of car parking spaces.
Just to kind of build on that, the figure comes from, I guess, a recent transport statement, and the 128 car parking spaces relates to the phase 2 development itself rather than replacing any existing car park. So that figure comes from the study that said that by virtue of developing phase 2, 128 car parking spaces will be required. And that study is quite recent, just last year. And in terms of balancing this application, in terms of the loss or the principle or the loss of public open space. The Riverside North Policy area allocates this land for the University of Peterborough development, and there is an acceptance that there will be a loss of POS because there is only limited amount of tarmacked or built area within the allocated land for the university site. So there is that acceptance, I guess, as part of that local plan process as well. And I think I'd probably just reiterate what was said. I'm not sure if Sylvia wants to add anything.
Yeah, I think Asif has explained the situation very well, actually, that, you know, we're looking at a fairly recent application. You know, it went to committee just in June last year, so it's only 12 months ago, and that provided up-to-date figures on the car parking requirement as a result of phase 2. And we're looking at that application now because this is a proposed change to it. We've got the temporary car park application. We've also got the second application we're looking at today, which is to vary condition 6 of that permission. And in terms of what the council has in front of us for this application, it is the evidence that was provided in that 2021 planning permission, which was granted and is extant. Appreciate that there is an evolving assessment of car parks within the city centre, that some of that information has been presented to the council, but that's in a sort of different context, you know, looking at the city centre as a whole. Whereas at the moment we're just looking at this particular application, and therefore there is a requirement arising out of that, and we're looking at a solution that has the least impact on the embankment and the least disruption to the future plans of the university. You know, in the local plan, the university is something that's very embedded in that. There's a policy specifically relating to it. So we know that there will be change, and we know there will be development in this part of the embankment. That's accepted, that's been looked at as part of the local plan. So I think in assessing this application, we're looking at a solution that has the least impact. It would be a temporary permission, and we know that there will be an outline application coming forward. There'll be a master plan for the campus, and that will bring more certainty, and it will look in a more comprehensive way at the requirements of future development, and then any car parking that would be necessitated as a result of that, and then whether any further car parking spaces are required. So I think we're trying to accommodate an evolving situation, both in terms of general city centre car parking and the evolving developments for the university, and try and make decisions that are acceptable, compliant with policy at different times through the evolution of the university. Because I think we very much want to reach an end goal, but knowing that there are going to be different stages along the way, and trying to accommodate that in the most sensitive way possible. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I wish to hopefully help to bring about an end to this questioning on the evidence that's needed for the number of parking spaces. I think actually Officer Sylvia has explained it quite well. The evidence, as far as I can see, is in the previous application, the phase 2 was it, which I wasn't party to because I'm here only as a substitute. But it's quite simple, there's your evidence. And this application is simply to facilitate the completion of that part of the works on the campus. As simple as that, and that's the way I'm looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Hogg. I would like you to ask a question, then I'm happy if you give a bit
So this is
background,
a simple
but
one, hopefully this is a
question,
simple one.
please. Yeah,
I
thank you.
just want some clarification on this 5-year thing. Is it, if we were to approve the application today, would the car park be removed and cleared 5 years from now, or does the clock start when they start to dig the ground? Yeah.
It'll be from the first use of the car park. So the 5 years will start from the first use of the car park.
So supplement question to that then is, so if it's 5 years from they start to use the car park, are we saying that it's going to take 5 years to build a replacement?
I think in principle it's to give a sufficient amount of time to develop an overall strategy. We're not saying that, you know, it'll take them 5 years before they start. It is expected that within a period earlier than 5 years they would start off that process. But
Councillor Hogg, can I intervene? Is this question relevant to this application?
Well, the application is...
Talking about future.
The application is seeking for a 5-year permission.
That's what's before us today, isn't it?
So what I'm saying is, I just wanted to find out, you know, is it going to take, could it take a year or 2 years before that 5 years start, and then it be another 5 years? So in that regard, it will be a 7-year process that we're now looking at, rather than just a 5-year process. And the point I was trying to make is the idea of the temporary car park is so that we've got somewhere to park the cars while they develop the permanent replacement, as it were. And for me, 5 years to develop a new car park seems quite excessive. To build a new car park from scratch probably takes a year, 2 years at max.
I think the number of 5 years is generally a typical extent of time that we'd grant for a temporary permission. It's used quite frequently, and it means that it gives sort of value for the investment that would be needed to lay out that car park. It gives enough time for the university to develop its plans. It doesn't mean that it will take up to that length of time, but it just allows enough flexibility so a further application partway through that time doesn't need to come into play.
Thank you. Councillor Hiller?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question of clarification to officers, if I might. No, that's okay. With regard to Councillor Hogg's point, he seems particularly concerned about the loss of open space. It's an area that concerns all members, I suggest, certainly myself. But I think for clarification, would you just confirm that the open space is going to be lost for a period of 5 years? When that starts and when it finishes is pretty academic. But before it starts, it's going to be open space. After it's finished, it's going to be open space. So we have a 5-year window of loss of open space. When it starts, I would suggest is academic for this exercise. Thank you. Would you confirm that?
yes.
No, go, that's fine.
Yep. Cheers.
Councillor Hussain?
I think it's all part of it's already been asked, but just to clarify, part of the original application for phase 2 was to provide a multi-deck car park with 128 spaces. If this temporary car park wasn't granted because the university is evolving and we as a council probably haven't really, or they haven't decided where the car park could be in the future, they still need to provide those spaces as part of that application. So if we don't end up with a temporary car park, we could potentially end up with a multi-deck car park at that place before. And also, going to Councillor Hogg's comment about when it will start, from my understanding, phase 2 can only be occupied once the spaces are there, so I don't see them wanting to delay it for 5 years because they won't be able to occupy phase 2. So am I right in assuming that?
Yeah, it's no later than 12 months following the first use of the building, which is the next item.
I think that answers Councillor Hogg's question. Any more questions? No? Right, if there are no more questions, I will move to debate. Any member wish to start the debate? Councillor Hussain.
I think it's, you know, it's, as we did the site visit, we can see that the university is an evolving project, as officers have highlighted. It's it's going to take time for those different buildings and for it to grow. So I think we need to work with the university to ensure that we do everything we can to make sure that we have a good, viable university. And those buildings will be there to stay for a long time, so we have to make sure that they're in the right place at the right time. So for me, I think I'm for this application, and I will be supporting officers on the application.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. Having looked at it in the grand scale of things, it's a small part of the embankment that we're talking about here. And happy at the fact that, it's only going to be temporary and it's going to be for 5 years and it's going to be returned. It's something that we've received, all councillors probably have received. There's been a Facebook campaign. But when you look at the grand scale of things, I'm happy to support officer recommendation on the basis that it is temporary, and after 5 years we're going to go back to the state that it's in at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Jamil. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chair. So a few points. I'm uneasy about the actual need for the 128 parking spaces, and I think as I've already said, ultimately there's no reason why you can't go back and say, look, we've done a study, we don't need 128 spaces, we only need 60 spaces, and can we get a condition change on the original application to facilitate that, so that we don't put extra resources into building twice the car park that we need, that we don't dig up open space provision. I mean, when we had the site visit, it was clear that it's well used. I mean, not in a good way, I have to say, because there was a lot of litter there, but that would evidence the fact that that area is probably well used by local citizens. Maybe the board councillors could maybe look to put some bin provision there, because of the litter, it was quite bad. I digress. Sorry. So for me, I'm not against the fact, obviously we need car parking spaces specifically for the pool. There's this parking strategy document that's come from Royal Haskonin. Presumably we've spent a lot of money looking at, or getting that report from them, that basically says that, there are a number of, I know it's about a strategy for the whole city, but when you look into it, there's a lot of detail in that report, and that detail goes car park by car park, and it looks at the capacity of those car parks and looks at the utilisation of those car parks. The swimming pool car park was running at about half capacity. Bishop's Road was very low. There are other car parks in the city that are well utilised, and so be it. St Martin House, another one that currently is very low on utilisation. Although we're putting a bridge in, which hopefully will encourage people to use that as a car park. Our local plan, states quite clearly. And I can never remember the numbers, LP 13A and LP 13B, which basically says that we should be encouraging people to walk, cycle, and get away from cars in the city centre. So I think that putting in capacity for extra car parking or like-for-like car parking when it's not currently being utilised, all that is doing is encouraging people to use their cars. And I think that is a dangerous place to be. I was also had a tour, as many of the members did, of the university building, and they've got a display there which is their intended or what they're looking to do with phase 1, 2, 3, etc. I didn't see a car park on there at all. I also didn't see a running track, and I didn't see a swimming pool. but there was no car park. And I did ask somebody about that, and they said, well, you know, we have got sufficient parking on site, and we're leasing some spaces from the Bishop's Road car park for the excess that we need. And actually, we are actively looking to encourage students and staff to use, you know, walking, cycling, and buses and trains to get to the site. And it's not something that we as a university want to be doing, is encouraging people to use more car parking spaces. So that I'll throw that one into the mix as well. As I said, I just don't feel that you know, I've been given sufficient evidence that these car parking spaces are needed for this application. You know, we keep talking about another application, but we're not supposed to look at those applications. We're supposed to be looking at the application before me. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm looking to not go with the recommendations and to refuse on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Hiller, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Of course, Councillor Hogg is exercising his democratic right to not support the officer's recommendation. That's fine. That's why we're here as a committee. The numbers, I think our officers, both senior and slightly less senior, have explained to my complete satisfaction why the number is the number. And the number of spaces required is within the report, and that is the application before us now. We haven't, as far as I'm aware, we haven't been referring to a previous application. That application has just supported that number. We're not referring to it. So your contestation that we shouldn't be referring to another application is nonsensical, because we weren't. We were just referring to the number. So as far as I'm concerned, it's been supported, evidentially supported. I am in support of the officer's recommendation. It is a temporary consent. It is a 5-year period that it's going to be a Grass Creek car park, and at eye level from Bishop's Road you probably would hardly see a difference other than cars, obviously, I get that, with a knee rail around the outside. It will be well managed, and it will be returned to its proper open space use in 5 years. Completely support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. Councillor Rangzib.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also minded of supporting this application based on a couple of, obviously, firstly, is the public benefit of the university, which is we have always desired for, and this is where our future is. And also, it is within the designated area of the future development. So therefore, I would want to support it. And I understand Councillor Hugg's concerns on the parking space is available now, and as he's mentioned that currently there is reduced parking spaces available because of the construction. However, I differ on that slightly, because I'm looking at the future expansion, and there is going to be phase 1, 2 and phase 3 development of the university, which will need further parking spaces, and this application is only for a temporary 5 years application. So therefore, I am minded to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Rangzib. Councillor Hussain.
It was just about the fixation. You know, we've got this fixation on the number of spaces. The key word is temporary. So we could look at any amount of studies about, you know, how many parking spaces we should have or need. But I think over a 5-year period, we will automatically find out how many spaces are being used or utilised. So if it's temporary in the future, you can then always check, you know, or discount spaces or add spaces if need be, because it's a temporary car park. So, you know, regardless of studies, I think we will find out within time how many spaces have been used by the university. And the last thing that I would want to see is that we've got less spaces and people are then having to park on the side streets and causing the residents in the area an issue. And then the other thing was open space. Looking at one of the slides where it shows the actual allocation of this car park towards the front, closer to Bishop's Road, I think there's still probably half of the field is still there, so there's still a lot of open space there to be used. So again, I'll be supporting officers.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Warren.
What I've been looking at with this application is weighing up the benefit to the harm with the loss of the open green space. And I believe that the benefit far outweighs the actual harm that we're going to do with the loss of green space. This is only a temporary, this is a 5-year car parking space, so I believe the benefit of the university far outweighs the actual harm. So I'm going to go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Any more debate? Well, I'm going to say something about it. Councillor Hogg, I welcome your point where you're saying that we need to look at it again, revisit it. It may be the case that we don't need 128 spaces. I think that's a valid point. You know, I'm going to give regard to it. However, was that possible in this application? That's what we need to look at. So what the officers are doing, they are relying on a report which was presented to them in 2021, which is quite recent. So they're using that as a base for the second phase. However, the point you've raised, I think is a credible point. Yes, I mean, obviously, why can't we review it again? We may not need 128 spaces. We may need only 60. Right? Again, if you look at it from the applicant's point of view, it would be better for them. They have to spend less money. Yes? So if to create 128 spaces, they'll spend a lot of money, but if you have to do 60 spaces, it'll be less. So if they are going with 128 spaces, it's possible they have to. So, valid point, I think you raised a good point. However, it hasn't convinced me to the extent that I go against the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Right, now I can see no more hands are raised. In that case, please, can I ask for a proposal? Councillor Jamil?
Chair, I propose that we go with officer recommendation. And
can I have a seconder? Councillor Hussain? You happy to second? Thank you. Now will we move to the vote? If members can raise their hands for those in favour of the officer's recommendation. Have you done the count, Dan? Thank you. Now, those against? And finally, abstentions? No. Thank you, members. Dan, please, can you read the result?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So the application to go with officer's recommendations was 8 for and 2 against, therefore it's approved.
Thank you very much. Now we're on item 4.2. Please can I ask Asif Ali to introduce the item? Thank you. Are we waiting for Dan?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This application is the application site is land at Bishop's Road, and the application seeks to amend condition 6 of the planning permission 21002874/R3FUL, which approved the full application for the phase 2 building and an outline permission for the multi-deck car park. Next slide, please. This slide just shows the phase 2 building location and the proposed location for the multi-deck car park on the regional pool car park. The additional red edge going around the POS, that was the original site for the multi-deck car park, but officers weren't in support of that, and we asked for it to be put on the regional pool car park. Next slide, please. So the description of development, the proposal is for the removal of condition 6. Condition 6 is as shown on the slide. Crucially, the line of interest to members may be the subject to the outline element of this permission, which essentially ties in the phase 2 building with the outline element of the multi-deck car park, essentially saying that no later than 12 months for the first use of phase 2, the multi-deck car park, providing no less than 128 additional spaces, needs to be provided. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is the proposed condition that officers are recommending, no later than 12 months. So the time period remains fixed. It just takes out the reference to the outline permission, so it still requires 100 or no less than 128 car parking spaces to be provided within the city centre by 12 months of the first use of phase 2. In terms of considerations, there's no objections from the local highway authority subject to the delivery of 128 car parking spaces. There were 4 comments received objecting relating to concerns over the construction of the car park, which were already considered as part of the main application. This just sought to amend a condition. Officers would just direct members' view to the update report. An incorrect location plan version was uploaded on file, and the correct one has been uploaded since. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Asif Ali, for your presentation. You have no people registered to speak on this item. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? No. Oh, Councillor Hussain?
Just simply, it's just to remove the condition of providing the multi-storey car park for phase 2. Is that all this is?
Yep, it just takes away the link so they can provide, or the applicant can provide the parking spaces via some other provision as the temporary car park, for example.
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I have a suggestion. I personally would prefer to know what the committee's view is, that any applications related to the university, I think they should come before the committee. Yeah, planning application, yes. Obviously, we're sitting on a planning committee, there's got to be planning. What do you agree with that, members? Is that possible?
I think, Councillor Iqbal, we've had 2 applications for the committee. Phase 1 was a delegated decision. Phase 2 came to committee. So there's no sort of previous precedent that requires all applications to come to committee. I think what I would say is that the university operates on quite tight funding timescales, and obviously having to take applications to committee can extend those timescales. Therefore, that's just something that would add a time constraint on the applicant. And given the council's current scheme of delegation, and that there are a lot of applications that come to officers where they don't trigger the requirements in the constitution, that seems to work quite well. I think you just need to bear in mind that if you did impose such a rule, it would be slightly different to the constitution. I suppose as you'd be setting in place a form of procedure that goes beyond the constitution, and it may place limits on providing for this facility that could have knock-on effects for the overall aims to achieve a university in a timely way. So that's just something I would point out to you.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg?
I just wanted to make the point that, so effectively, the reason so all applications go through a scheme where the chair and the group reps of the committee get to see applications and effectively are able to call it into committee if need be. So effectively that could in fact happen, but it would be with the committee chair and the group reps to be able to do that essentially. I think there has been a bit of a hiccup in terms of group reps, which has now been sorted, and going forward. So I think there's no need to change, is the point. I think the current procedure allows for, if that's something that you feel as a group rep, that it was something that you would want to happen, then you could probably make that happen.
Just the way you did it. Thank you. Councillor Lane.
I was just about to say that your question has nothing to do with this application, so I suggest we proceed accordingly.
Just a suggestion, Councillor Lane. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Hiller.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Hogg. I think there are checks and balances in place, albeit weren't perhaps a month or so ago, but they are now. I also completely agree with Sylvia Bland in that this could put time constraints on stuff that's pretty contentious from a money point of view. Moreover, I would also remind you, Chair, that with regard to Fletton Quays, a massive development of Fletton Quays, most of that went through on delegated decision basis. Northminster, the outline came before committee, but the reserve matters was delegated. I think we've got enough checks and balances in place. I completely understand the nuance of the question, but I don't think it's necessary in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. If there are no more questions, I will move to debate. Any members wish to start the debate? Councillor Hiller.
I have nothing of any import to say, Chair, other than I agree with the recommendation. I think it's a natural course of events. You've got an extant consent which is just being altered, frankly. I don't see there's any issue given what's just gone before us. I would support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. In that case, Councillor Hogg.
Sorry, I was just going to say that essentially that is that because of what we've just decided, it kind of makes this decision a bit of a moot point, because there are now a position where 128 spaces can be provided. So there's the condition proposal. Although I have to say that it does look like that that the multi-duct car park is probably not going to happen. But we shall see.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. As there's no further debate, can I ask for a proposal then, please? Councillor Hiller?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to propose that we accede to the officer's recommendation.
Can I have a seconder? Councillor Jamil, are you happy to second?
Happy to second.
Okay, now we'll move to the vote. If members can raise their hands for those in favour. Against? And finally, any abstentions? Thank you, members. Dan, please, can you read the result?
Thank you, Jay. That application is granted unanimously.
Thank you, and that concludes the meeting for today. Thank you very much.